The Bible says very clearly that some kind of astronomical object is going to strike the earth with terrible consequences. And here to continue a discussion that we had on our last broadcast is author and lecturer and just all-around good guy, Tom Horn. Welcome back to Prophecy
Hey,
Watchers.
Gary, great to be with you again.
It's always fun to talk to you and to talk with you because we have these common ideas that we like to discuss. And some people might say, well, isn't that just a little bit far out? You got to think about the day in which we live, because we live in far out times. We live in the days the Bible said prophecy would be fulfilled. Mm-hmm. Tom has written the Wormwood Prophecy that talks about the collision of an object from outer space with planet Earth, Revelation 8:10. And we might say, well, you know, that's possible. In fact, Tom, astronomers are watching even as we speak.
Right, yeah. Anybody can Google it. Go look up NASA's NEO-WISE team and the trajectory of 165,000 asteroids that they're trying to map throughout the cosmos.
How do you do that?
Yeah, well, it's a lot of people and a lot of machinery and they've always been there. We don't even know how many near-Earth objects in the past, right? Every once in a while, one of them strikes the Earth. What was the one over Russia, just a couple of years ago?
Absolutely.
That came down through the atmosphere and blew up. And we had another near miss with a city-killing size asteroid around Christmas of this year.
That's right.
Yeah, they're there. But according to this scripture, if I'm interpreting it correctly, and I tend to believe that it is talking about an asteroid, at some point during the tribulation period, a very large body is going to impact the earth, and it is going to pollute a third of the waters. In fact, you and I were talking off the program about how would a third of the waters become polluted? How could an asteroid do that? How could it fulfill that prophecy? And that was one of the interesting journeys that I went on when I started doing all of this research, because in the beginning, my friend Bob McGinnis, the colonel, his day job's a senior analyst at the Pentagon. Mm-hmm. I said, can you put me in contact with like an impact specialist? Because I need to know, first of all, would Apophis be big enough to fulfill this prophecy? Where would it have to hit the ocean? I'm thinking in all these kind of ways, right? And he gave me a lot of valuable information. Some of it wound up in the book. But along the way, he also helped school me regarding asteroids, that there's a lot of other kinds of ways. It's not necessarily just the size and where it might impact the ocean, because I'm thinking, it's going to move back up through the tributaries and pollute the waters? And there's just so many other ways I discovered that this prophecy could be fulfilled.
Now, to bring some of you up to date, you didn't see the last program. We're talking about Revelation 8:10, and the third angel sounded, and there fell a great star from heaven, burning as it were a lamp, and it fell upon the third part of the rivers, upon the fountains of the waters. The name of the star is called Wormwood. And I was talking with Tom before we came on today, and I've always thought, Tom, that this wormwood, as the Bible calls it, it falls in the water, poisons the water. It must be some kind of asteroid that's perhaps out there right now. And furthermore, it has to be water soluble, because it has to dissolve in the water and poison the water. Mm-hmm. And that's about all I ever thought about it. And now I'm talking with Tom. And Tom has received a prompting from the Lord, and we talked about that on the last program. He believes that the Lord has inspired him with a vision of what's going to happen, and he's followed up on that with the Wormwood Prophecy. And let's become a bit less visionary and more factual, mm-hmm. because there is a wormwood out there right now, you mm-hmm. believe.
There is. I happen to believe right now that it is the asteroid Apophis. I happen to believe that Apophis is more likely than not to impact the Earth on Friday the 13th, April of 2029.
That's not your date.
That's NASA's date.
NASA's date.
Yeah, that's the NEOWISE team at NASA. That's the date that they've put. And even though they've changed their calculations, and in the book, by the way, I go into some very intelligent individuals that are as smart as any of the people working at NEOWISE or smarter. Like Nathan Myhrvold, who ran the tech department for Microsoft for years. He's considered to be Bill Gates' second brain. Right? He's consistently, year after year, listed in the top 100 critical scientific thinkers in the world. So the guy, he holds 800 patents. He's a polymath. I mean, the guy is a brain, right? And he wrote a paper that people can look up online right now that was peer-reviewed in an astronomy magazine. And it was written in 2019, so it's a recent paper, in which he accuses NASA of deception. And he says that it is, it's not incidental, it's not that they've just made a mistake, that they are intentionally covering up the threat that is posed by some of these asteroids, including Apophis. Now, we could have a whole show on why would they intentionally be doing that.
Well, that's the question rotating through my mind right now.
I mean, obviously because you would have chaos. If you said to the world in 9 years from right now, an asteroid the size of Apophis is going to impact the Earth, you'd have people become survivalists. They'd quit their jobs. I mean, there'd be all kinds of chaos.
Movies have been made.
Martial law, would have to be imposed as a result of what would happen. But here's the thing: in 5 years from now, you're not going to be able to hide it any longer, because by that time, Apophis will be swimming towards the Earth and be close enough that people with fairly commercialized telescopes from their home are going to be able to sit. Gary, you got the magazines for years, and you have the giant telescope. You'll be able to literally sit in your home and look into deep space and see Apophis moving towards the Earth. And by that time, smart lay mathematicians and whatever are going to be able to determine on their own that this rock is on a trajectory to hit this planet.
Now, there was a movie once called the Andromeda Strain, and you referenced that.
Yeah.
And tell us about that, and tell us about all of the possibilities that we're looking at.
Yeah, because, well, that was the other thing. I wanted to know, how could it pollute a third of the waters? So I started out with one theory. It grew into several other theories that are actually scientifically feasible. You said a moment ago, let's talk about what's really more scientifically feasible, not necessarily just visionary. So the Andromeda Strain, it won awards at the time, 1969, I think. Michael Crichton wrote the book, but he based it on real science. The idea of the book, of course, is that our scientists, they've sent a satellite up into space. They're trying to harvest microorganisms out of space for a bioweapons, project. But anyway, it crashes in Piedmont, Arizona, right? And all of a sudden, everybody in Piedmont, Arizona is dead. So they send in a team of people in hazmat suits. They find the satellite. They find out that indeed it did bring back a microorganism. And the nature of this microorganism is that it causes people's blood to clot instantaneously or near instantaneously through their body. But it raised this question: could an asteroid, could Apophis, be carrying a microorganism, an alien organism, in which a virus has hitched a ride, right? Then it impacts the Earth, either land or sea. All this debris is kicked up into the upper atmosphere. It goes into the jet stream. It moves all this stuff all around the Earth. Then it rains down on the Earth, including into the waters and into the streams. And this virus then becomes something that is a new Black Death, a contagion, something for which we have no immunities because this thing comes from deep space. It's just something utterly alien to us. That's one of the ways by which wormwood could turn the waters bitter, absinthe. That's one of the ways that could happen.
Yeah, and you in your book, and by the way, it's called the Wormwood Prophecy. You spend a lot of time analyzing absinthe, the Greek word, which is translated into English as wormwood.
Right.
As I recall, you go through a couple of chapters delving very deeply into the meaning of this word and the meaning of what might happen to the waters of planet Earth. Now, this is in the Bible, folks. I believe the Bible. I believe that Revelation 8, verse 10 is going to happen, period. If it's there, it's going to happen. So you spent time talking about the type of reaction that might occur,
Right.
under the rubric of Wormwood.
Well, imagine this. We know that, like, beneath the ice of the Antarctica, there are ancient organisms, right?
Yeah.
Some of these could be like a prehistoric version of the Ebola virus or something like that. It could be something that's actually not coming from space. It's under the ground here on Earth right now. And all it would take is a sizable body to impact the Earth, to blast that material up into the air and into the waters. And you could have, again, a new kind of contagion. There's a science that's called lake inversion. You know, we have these lakes, like, is it called Neos or whatever it is in Africa, that a few years ago burped or popped or whatever it is it does, right? And it blew out enough carbon dioxide that it killed thousands of people, thousands of animals. One of NASA's own scientists speculated what would happen if Apophis impacted the supervolcano that we have here. Yellowstone. Right? We don't know what's deep down inside the Earth. It could be inside there. We know extremophiles, so extreme organisms that can live through extreme heat, extreme cold, like what would be in space.
Sure.
And there's a whole science around panspermia, the whole idea that life could travel to Earth on board a meteor or an object like this. But so it could be something that's already beneath the Earth, and then based on where Apophis or Wormwood impacted the Earth, that would cause this debris to be blasted up from underneath the planet right now, something that's ancient and long gone.
Now, on our last broadcast, and I should bring those who didn't see it up to date, Revelation 8 talks about a sequence of events. It talks about 4 trumpets. It talks about hail and fire mingled with blood. It talks about a mountain burning with fire. It talks about a star falling from heaven and poisoning the waters. And on our last broadcast, Tom, and I think very wisely pointed out, this could be a sequence of events, 1, 2, 3, caused by not one, but a series of astronomical
Well, even 1, 2,
catastrophes.
3, 4, because the 4th trumpet describes the sky being blacked out, the sun and the moon.
Right.
I remember, Gary, I was in McMinnville, Oregon, years ago, and I was inside of a building, and somebody walked in the building, and they said, Mount St. Helens just exploded. And we all went out into the parking lot and looked towards Washington. It literally looked like a nuclear bomb had gone off. I mean, the cloud going up, the rolling cloud on the top, it literally looked like a nuclear warhead, right? We were amazed by it. We stood out there for hours looking at it, talking about it. But I went home.
And the dust from that came all the way to Oklahoma.
This is my point. I got up the next morning, right? And I walked outside. It was a little bit early, so I thought, what is this? Is it fog? What is this, right? And but as the sun rose, I noticed that I still couldn't see. I couldn't see the sun, the moon, the stars. They were really vague to me. And what it was a very heavy ash dust from Mount St. Helens was raining down upon the Earth. It had traveled hundreds of miles. Well, then I later found out it traveled thousands of miles, right?
Yeah, to Oklahoma, by the way. My car was covered with dust.
Yeah, and it turned out we needed to put special filters on our cars and a whole bunch of stuff. And some smart people swept a bunch of it up and started selling little tiny bottles of it for $10, right? But the point was, it illustrated that you could have something impact the Earth, knock all of this debris up into the upper atmosphere, where it'd be carried around the Earth and then rain down upon the Earth.
Down.
So that's, and that is what I think happens in the 4th trumpet as a result of this large body. The first part of the debris field ahead of it sets the fields on fire like it describes. The second body hits the Earth. The third body, Wormwood, hits the Earth. And then for a period of days, the sun and the moon and the stars are blacked out. You literally have a prophet here describing in detail the actual chronology of a large body like Apophis striking the Earth and how that would play out. If it did, how it would play out.
And now, this brings me back to something you said on our last broadcast, and that is that there are people in high places in the governments of the world who do not ignore the possibility that an Apophis, and by the way, Apophis is a real asteroid. It's not biblical.
Right.
I mean, scientists have tracked it with telescopes. They're tracking it even as we speak. And you, in a visionary sort of way, seem to have been warned that Apophis may well be at our doorstep.
I believe that within a little over 9 years from right now, that Apophis is going to impact the Earth. There are some things, I don't want to claim that they are supernatural, but there are some things around even the dating that NASA has put on this that are very, very intriguing to me, I think would be to some of your audience too, especially people that believe in a pre-tribulation rapture, as I know we do.
Yes.
And if you take the date, Friday the 13th, April 2029, which we believe if it is Wormwood, then that event is happening sometime around the middle of the Great Tribulation period.
Right.
If you take that date and back up exactly 3.5 years earlier, right, which would be like a last minute for a rapture, if, I'm not saying that this is going to happen in 2025, but if this is Wormwood. So it's a big if. But if you back up 3.5 years exactly, it falls on the Feast of Tabernacles in the Hebrew calendar. Now, why is that important? Because the Feast of Tabernacles, or Sukkot, this was an event that was required for the Hebrews in ancient times to travel from wherever they were. They had to come to Jerusalem and put all of their tents around the Holy of Holy place, right? And be there in the presence of God. But what did they do when they were there? They would offer 70 bulls, and most scholars believe that they're offering these bulls in celebration of God having delivered them from all of the pagan gods of these other countries, especially having delivered them during the Exodus from Egypt. So they would have literally, so to think about this for a moment, they would have literally been celebrating that God delivered them from the gods of chaos, Apophis being chief among them, out of Egypt. That's what they were celebrating.
And what are the odds?
Now that date, from Apophis impact, 3.5 years earlier, literally lands on the Feast of Tabernacles.
Wow.
Now, Tabernacles is also related by some to the rapture. Why? Because Jesus says, I'm going to my Father's house. Where I am, there you may be also. In my Father's house are many tabernacles, tents, houses, booths, whatever you want to call them. So it is allegorical to the Feast of Tabernacles, the commentary he's making. Someday in heaven, you're going to do what we're only playing out here in Jerusalem now, where the tents all come around the Holy of Holy place. This is actually going to be when you gather together with me, with my Father in heaven. 10 days before that in 2025 is Rosh Hashanah. And many evangelicals believe that Rosh Hashanah is a great candidate for when the rapture is going to happen. Why? Because 100 trumpets are sounded during Rosh Hashanah until the final one sounds. And Paul wrote to the Corinthians that this event is going to happen when the final trump sounds. He wrote the same thing to the Thessalonians. We will gather together to meet him in the air, but it'll happen at the final trump. So a lot of people look at that and say, he is talking about a future Rosh Hashanah, which is 10 days before the Feast of Tabernacles.
Right.
So that dating, and then if you look at the exact date when Apophis is supposed to strike Earth, comes at the end of Passover. So there's something very curious here. I almost suspected that NASA set that date on purpose because they saw this, the Feast of Tabernacles 3.5 years to the date later when Apophis is supposed to strike the earth at the end of Passover of that year. So it's very curious.
Well, however they set the date, whether they studied it with satellite-borne telescopes and observed angles and observed acceleration factors and put that in a computer and decided on the date. But they named it Apophis.
Right.
That intrigues me. But why would you name give this asteroid, which could be an Earth killer, a demonic name.
Well, but you've seen that with NASA a lot. They name a lot of asteroids and different bodies after the names of these pagan gods, Eros and other names. In fact, a common name for a common asteroid is an Apollo asteroid. And in antiquity, Apollo, which relates, by the way, to Revelation chapter 9, the very next chapter following Revelation 8, that's talking about all this event, opens by saying that a star, an asteron, falls from heaven with a key to the bottomless pit.
Right.
But then it gives it a personal pronoun. Unto him is given this key to the bottomless pit. But what's inside the bottomless pit, they have a king down there over these creatures that are going to be unleashed on the earth, and his name is Abaddon, or in his Greek hath his name Apollyon, or Apollo. And you and I have done whole programs, people can go into your archives and watch, where this is the same spirit that will inhabit Antichrist.
So in your spare time, go back to the book of Revelation, chapter 8, and just read trumpet 1, trumpet 2, trumpet 3, trumpet 4, and trumpet 5, which sounds, this is in Revelation 9:1, and the fifth angel sounded, and I saw a star fall from heaven to earth, and to him was given the key, the bottomless pit. And of course, the key opens literally hell on earth. Now, we're talking about subject matter that's very familiar to Christians who study their Bibles. We've talked about these things all our lives. Now we're sort of another step up in the way we talk about it, the reality, the possibility of it. Now, I am a dispensationalist, pre-trib, pre-mill, all the way, and I believe that things on earth right now are taking a very, very dark turn, and as do you if you study the epistles of Paul, for example, and he describes what's going to happen in the last days. We see it happening right now, which means it's not a stretch in our thinking to imagine that this Apophis, as it's called, could actually be the one.
Well, again, I don't like to set dates.
I don't either.
But if you ask me in my heart of hearts what I believe is going to happen, I believe that Apophis is going to impact Earth in 2029. And I personally believe that it will most likely fulfill the Wormwood Prophecy. Now, one of the things, and we did not get into everything that I saw in this vision that prompted me to start doing all this research. And I want the research to rest on the facts and not my personal revelation. That's just what motivated me to start doing this.
But what started it for you was a vision, and that vision rolled out with several facts or factors as integral within the vision itself.
Right.
And you mentioned that we really didn't talk about the whole thing. Well, I'm sure it was highly detailed.
It was highly detailed. I'm supposed to speak at your conference in June.
Yes.
I may go into some of the details there and maybe elaborate further on why I believe so strongly in the fact that this is going to happen. Also, in the book, I do talk about some of the other scientists, highly qualified individuals. We've only mentioned Nathan Myhrvold, but Harry Lear is another highly qualified scientist who, in fact, wrote a letter to Donald Trump as soon as he was elected president, begging him to have the government scientists recalculate the trajectory of Apophis because he's convinced that it is indeed going to impact the Earth. So there's other people. But along the way, I also have a friend that has above top secret security clearance at NASA. And he was the very first one that essentially whispered in my ear that there is a cover-up and that NASA knows that the possibility of Apophis hitting the Earth is far greater than what they are admitting right now. And early on, he was actually in this book. I named him in the book and I named what he was saying. And then he showed up at our Branson conference this last year, 2019. And he said, I got to talk to you. So we go into the back room and he says, you have got to take my name out of the book. You got to take what I said out of the book. Somehow they had found out about it. They drew him in front of an adjudicator. They were making all kinds of threats. So that too, to me, smelled like cover-up. What is it that they are afraid that information could get out? So the book spends a great deal of time verifying that this is not just Tom Horn's whimsical ideas. There are other far smarter people than me who also believe what the book is saying.
And the book is The Wormwood Prophecy by Tom Horn. And it's a good read on several levels, spiritually, dynamically, in terms of physics, in terms of what asteroids do, what their effects would be. He follows a number of different pathways to bring together the Wormwood Prophecy. Yours for a gift of $25, free shipping anywhere in the U.S. You go to our website, prophecywatchers.tv, scroll down the online library, and you'll find Tom Horn's name, and you'll see the Wormwood Prophecy, yours for $25. By the way, we also have the Wormwood package, and the Wormwood package is including a wonderful, and I should say very powerful DVD called Belly of the Beast. I can't go into what's in it right now. And also a book by Jeff Martis called What Dwells Beyond, the Bible Believer's Handbook to Understanding Life in the Universe, sort of a companion to the Wormwood Prophecy. Belly of the Beast, What Lies Beyond, yours for $60, free shipping anywhere in the United States. $60 for the package, $25 for the book. And believe me, Tom Horn has put his heart and soul into this book. I've read it. There's an urgency about it. There is a tension throughout this book. And I believe the tension is real. It's out there in the world right now. I think there are people in high places who are feeling the tension as we speak.
Mm-hmm. And I'm a prophecy believer. So I believe that the Wormwood Prophecy is going to happen not because I had a vision. I believe it's going to happen because it's in the Bible.
It is.
And right now we are surrounded by literally a concatenation of events that are taking place. Any part of Matthew 24, any part of the book of Revelation, all the things that it talks about in the minor prophets as well, is unfolding at rapid pace around the world today.
And the epistles of Paul, talking about societal breakdown, we see it, and it's coming at lightning speed, absolute lightning speed.
Right. I think another thing going into 2020 is nationally, we are at probably a pivotal point, and that's an understatement.
Yes. In fact, did you notice we're making this just after the first of the year 2020, right at the first part of the year. And have you noticed that 2020 seems to have brought with it an acceleration on all levels? On all levels.
Look at what's happening with Iran, an $80 million bounty being put on President Trump's head. It's the clash of the nations as was foresaw in the book of Daniel, as foresaw in the book of Revelation.
Indeed. Well, I wish we had more time. We have come to the end of our allotment. Tom, it's always a pleasure to talk with you, and may the Lord go with you and guide your footsteps.
Thank you, Gary. Great to be here.
And I'm Gary Stearman, as always, reminding you that we are watching. You be watching too. Thanks for joining us on Prophecy Watchers. You can find us on the web at prophecywatchers.com. In the meantime, keep watching, everybody, and we'll see you soon.